Welcome back to the Center for Critical and Cultural Theory. My name is Roger Green. This is a contextualized reading for Acts 4 and probably 5, if I can get to it, of William Shakespeare's Twelfth Night. So there's been a whole series and an intro. This is an ongoing series of contextualized readings that I do for various different Shakespeare plays. They are meant for a general audience, people who are new to Shakespeare, who are having maybe some difficulty dealing with Elizabethan English, and then setting a little bit of the cultural context. I'm not making big scholarly paper-like arguments in these lectures. It's just about sort of understanding and getting some context for what's going on in the play. So let's jump into Act 4. At the end of Act 3, remember there was this situation where a kind of false or a faux duel has been set up between Cesario and Sir Andrew. This is just one of the many games that Sir Toby has been playing. Antonio, mistaking Cesario / Viola for Sebastian, jumps in to step in for Cesario in the duel, and then he gets arrested by officers because he's an outlaw in Illyria. In the process, he names Sebastian, and Viola just / Cesario gets just a glimpse of a hint that maybe her brother is still alive. So when we jump into Act 4, Scene 1, here, it opens with Fest. All sorts of just misrecognition going on all over the place here. Fest is misrecognizing Sebastian for Cesario. He's been sent by Olivia to go get Cesario. Fest says, "Will you make me believe that I am not sent for you?" So obviously they're in the middle of some situation where Fest has been trying to get Sebastian to come, thinking that Sebastian is Cesario. Sebastian says, go to, thou art a foolish fellow. Let me be clear of thee. Fest just says, well held out in faith. So Fest kind of thinks that this is just some verbal sparring that's going on with Cesario, right? Because they've been doing that already in the play. So he says, no, I do not know you, nor am I not sent to you by my lady to bid you to come speak with her, nor your name is not Master Cesario, nor this is not my nose neither. Nothing that is so is so. We're going to come back to that phrase later on in the play here. I prithee, vent thy folly somewhere else. And eventually, Sebastian's like trying to give him money to go away. There's money for thee. I'll tarry longer. I shall give worse payment if you tarry longer. By my troth, thou hast an open hand. These wise men that give fools money get themselves a good report after 14 years' purchase. So then we shift over to Sir Andrew, who comes in, and here also mistakes Sebastian for Cesario, and strikes him. Then Sebastian strikes back, and it's getting vicious here, right? This is not play. This is not the faux setup that Sir Toby had in mind. So we've escalated the violence here. Sir Toby then restrains Sebastian, holds him back. Fest runs off to tell Olivia what's going on. And then there's more of this kind of mixed up exchange. Sebastian frees himself and draws his sword. And so remember, there wasn't going to be a real sword fight, but now it's potentially bloody. And Olivia arrives just in time to break in. Hold, Toby, on thy life I charge thee, hold. Madam, so Sir Toby stops. Will it ever be thus, ungracious wretch, fit for the mountains and the barbarous caves where manners never were preached? Out of my sight. So she sends Sir Toby away. She's really pissed off at him. Be not offended, dear Cesario. And then to Sir Toby, Rudesby, be gone. And so I think we should just sort of mention here that Sebastian doesn't correct being called the wrong name. Maybe Sebastian's just kind of like dumbfounded, doesn't really know what's going on or misses it. I don't know. The play just doesn't give us an answer there. Uh, I prithee, gentle friend, let thy fair wisdom, not thy passion, sway in this uncivil and unjust extent against thy peace. Go with me now to my house, and hear thou there how many fruitless pranks this ruffian has botched up, that thou thereby mayest smile at this. Thou shalt not choose but go. Do not deny. Beshrew his soul for me. He started one poor heart of mine in thee. And so Olivia is just saying, come back to the house. I will explain everything. I have this relative who's kind of an asshole, and Sebastian follows suit. So Sebastian clearly seems to be taken with Olivia here. What relish in this? How runs the stream? Or am I mad, or else in this is a dream? Let fancy still my sense, and lathe steep. If it be thus to dream, let me sleep. And so this is a reference, of course, a classical reference to the river of Lethe. When you're dipped into it, you lose all of your memory. And Sebastian's in this kind of like, am I in a dream? I'm in a state of wonder, but I'm also being taken up with the beauty of this person. So maybe still let me sleep. If I'm dreaming, just let it keep going on. And Olivia says, nay, come, I prithee, would thou be ruled by me? Madam, I will. So there's that servant master slave exchange kind of going on, to use Hegel's dialectic, is the later German philosopher who has the famous master slave dialectic that talks about these kinds of relationships, obviously well after Shakespeare's time. So we have Sebastian following Olivia willingly back to her house. Change scene to Act 4, Scene 2. We have Maria carrying a gown and a false beard, and then Fest, and she's having Fest dress up as the local clergy person, Sir Topaz, and the curate. So this would be the person who handles the little church on the estate's property. So these are the smaller. We're not talking about like a big church in town. There's the priest later on is going to be part. Is going to fill that function. So Maria says, "Nay, I prithee, go put on this gown and beard. Make him believe thou art Sir Topaz the curate. Do it quickly. I'll call Sir Toby the whilst." And Fest says, "Well, I'll put it on, and I will dissemble myself in it. And I were the first that ever dissembled in such a gown. I am not tall enough to become the function well, nor lean enough to be thought a good student, but to be said an honest man, and a good housekeeper goes as fairly as to say a careful man and a great scholar. So whatever, what I don't really look the part, I don't act the part, nor do I know the part, but I can fill a part, whatever. It's going to be okay. What you will, right? That's part of the second name for the play, Twelfth Night, or What You Will. So Fest shows up, and at first, Sir Toby says, "Jove bless thee, master parson." And so remember, they're invoking Jove here. Later on, there's going to be a law about using any kind of swearing in public with God's name. But the Jove thing sends us into the pagan side of things that is still apparently acceptable for Shakespeare to have on play or on the stage at the moment. And it sets us into the sort of carnival-esque realm. And so Fest says in a kind of corrupt Spanish, "Buenos dias, Sir Toby, for as the old hermit of Prague that never saw pen and ink very wittily said to a niece of King Gorboduc," who's also just a kind of fictional king of England, that is. So I, being master parson, am master parson. For what is that but that, and is but is. This has been going on throughout the play, this kind of um, playful reference to language of logic and a lot of tautology or circular thinking and circular reasoning with sentences. Remember from the last contextualized reading, the first books of English grammar were showing up in the 1580s. And then also like legal scholars and the audience or people who are in training to become lawyers are in Shakespeare's audience. So legal language and the logical flow of legal language is all being played upon here. It's like making fun of what you have to do in school. The editors say that this is making fun in particular of a self-evident axiom of affirming, whereby a thing is said to be or not to be. So you can think about, of course, Hamlet is written at the same around the same time as Twelfth Night, and the famous "to be or not to be" speech is doing the same thing, because Hamlet is a scholar who's come home from Wittenberg, Germany, and he's working out all the stuff he's learned at school, and he's become a rhetorician of sorts, even though he's maybe not graduated yet, and he's working that out with his own situation here. The editors nicely point to the fact that earlier in that Act 4, Scene 1, around line 8, when Fest said nothing that is so when he was talking to Sebastian, that this is a parallel here to that earlier phrase. And so they send Fest in disguise to talk to Malvolio. Now we know Malvolio is kind of the Puritan, right? And he has been sent away because they think that he's crazy, right? Because he's bought into this fake letter that Maria and Sir Toby have manufactured, mostly Maria's design in this part, for the letter, to make it seem like Olivia's in love with him. And then he made a fool out of himself in the earlier act and got sent away to a kind of, and they take him and put him into a kind of solitary confinement, right, into like a black room, so that he can't be stressed out, so that his mind can be at ease. Now they send Fest in disguise of the local curate. So Malvolio at first is happy to see the curate. He's like, oh, somebody who's gonna like understand what I'm going through, and somebody who's religious. And Malvolio says, Sir Topus, good Sir Topus, go to my lady. And Fest's response is, out, hyperbolic fiend! How vexest thou this man? Talkest thou nothing but of ladies? So his response is to fake an exorcism of the demon and to pretend that Malvolio is possessed by a demon, right? And he's only talking about ladies, like he's obsessed with sex, right? And turning all of the Puritan prim and properness that Malvolio had right back against him. Malvolio says, Sir Topus, never was a man thus wronged. Good Sir Topus, I do not think I am mad. They have laid me here in hideous darkness. Fie, thou dishonest Satan, I call thee by the most modest terms, for I am one of those gentle ones that will use the devil himself with courtesy. Sayest thou that that house is dark? As hell, Sir Topus. Why, it hath bay windows transparent as barricadoes, and the clerestories toward the southward are as lustrous as ebony. And yet complainest thou of obstruction? I'm not mad, Sir Topus, says Malvolio. I say this to you. I say the house is dark. And Fest says, madman, thou errest. I say there is no darkness but ignorance, in which thou art more puzzled than the Egyptians in their fog. So just turning this stuff back, of course, you can imagine probably people howling in laughter, even in Shakespeare's time at what's going on the stage here. And just Shakespeare pushing the kind of religious pedantry to making fun of it and pushing his ability to make fun of it on stage to the extremes in this particular section. Just the masterful work of Shakespeare being able to walk that line in a time where there is not free speech in England, for sure, right? So pushing everybody's buttons just enough. So then Sir Toby shows up. They're feigning that they're worried about Malvolio. Um, Maria comments that he probably didn't even need to have the beard and the gown on. He doesn't even see you. But Fest says, to him in thine own voice, or Sir Toby says, to him in thine own voice, in your voice, right? And bring me word about how thou findest him. I would were well rid of this knavery. If he be conveniently delivered, I would he were. For I'm now so far in offense with my niece that I cannot pursue with any safety to this sport. So Sir Toby's like starting to say, like, okay, this is getting to be enough is enough. Like we've had our fun. I've already pissed off my niece with this whole thing with the duel and Sir Andrew. I'm in the doghouse. We probably need to bring this thing to a close. Instead, Fest goes and he sings in his own voice, and then Malvolio calls out to the fool. He keeps on singing, and Malvolio says, "Good fool, ever thou wouldst deserve well at my hand. Help me to a candle and pen and ink and paper. As I am a gentleman, I will live to be thankful to thee for it." And so Malvolio, gone in Malvolio's mind is the fact that he was totally trashing Fest earlier in the play, right? And this gives us the motive for why Fest is doing this, like that early exchange between Olivia and Fest and Malvolio, where Malvolio says, like, you basically fools, you knaves shouldn't even exist, right? And Olivia says, wait a minute, a knave gets to do this. It's a fool's job to do what he's doing, and she protects him. So Fest says, Master Malvolio, aye, good fool. Alas, sir, how fell you wit besides your 5 wits? Malvolio says, fool, there was never a man so notoriously abused. I am as well in my wits, fool, as thou art. Fest says, but as well? Then you are mad indeed if you be no better in your wits than a fool, always playing on the language. Malvolio says, they have here propertied me, keep me in darkness, send ministers to me, asses, as do and do all they can to face me out of my wits. And so there's this play on madness here, right? Like it is horrifying. He's somebody who is not crazy, and everybody around him gaslighting him or showing him that he's crazy. But of course, it's payback for what he has done to them as well. So Fest says that he will go and get a letter or get a pen and ink. And then he comes back to pretend that, but just before that, he comes back to pretend that he's Sir Topas again. So we see Fest on stage doing a kind of ventriloquism, or at least impersonations of Sir Topas, and then back to himself in one exchange. So of course, whoever's playing the part of Fest has a really great moment to shine here as an actor as well. As Sir Topas, he says, maintain no words with him, fellows. He's like, don't talk to the madman. He's possessed by a demon. Fest says as himself, who, I, sir? No, not I, sir. God be with you, good Sir Topas. And then as Sir Topas, Mary, amen. And so that exchange. And then Fest says that he's going to go fetch a light and paper and pen, so a candle, paper, and pen. Malvolio says, I'll requite it in the highest degree. I prithee be gone. Fest goes off singing a song here. I'm gone, sir, and anon, sir, I'll be with you again in a trice, like to the old vice, your need to sustain. That is not a slant rhyme, just to let you know. Again and sustain, there would be a full rhyme in Shakespearean's English. Sometimes in poetry, when we have end rhyme and the rhyme is intentionally off, it adds meaning to something. But I would say that in this case, again and sustain are both constant enough. Like we hear it a little bit differently, especially if you're in the United States, like me. Again, we say, but we say sustain, right? So it's a little bit of a different register there. Who with dagger of Lath in his rage and his wrath might be closer to wraith, cries aha to the devil, like a mad lad, pare thy nails, dad, adieu, good man, devil. We're then at the end of Act 4, Scene 2. We're into Act 4, Scene 3 now. Enter Sebastian. And again, this theme of madness is going to carry over. We've had Malvolio, who is being told that he's mad in a kind of gaslighting type of way. And Sebastian, who's thought that he's maybe caught in a dream or maybe he's going mad, but he keeps asserting his own sanity as well. So in this first little speech, this is the air that is the glorious sun. The pearl she gave me, I do feel it and see it. And though 'tis wonder that enwraps me thus, yet 'tis not madness. Where's Antonio then? I could not find him at the Elephant, yet there he was, and there I found this credit, that he did range the town to seek me out. His counsel now might do me golden service, for though my soul disputes well with my sense that this may be some error, but no madness, yet doth this accident and flood of fortune so far exceed all instance, all discourse, that I am ready to distrust mine eyes and wrangle with my reason that persuades me to any other trust, but that I am mad, or else the lady's mad. Yet if 'twere so, she could not sway her house, command her followers, take and give back affairs in their dispatch with such a smooth, discreet, and stable bearing as I perceive she does. There's something in it that's deceivable. And so he's just reasoning it out. He's trying to, but that play of madness and sanity, foolishness and knavery is all and at this point in the play, it's just been an ongoing theme and motif, and so we're just hearing this in the resonance of the auditorium as we watch the play on stage, right? So. Enter Olivia and the priest. Olivia basically grabbed the priest and says, I'm taking you, Sebastian, who she thinks is Cesario, and we're going to get married right now. And we're not going to tell anybody about it. It's just going to be secret, but we're going to seal the deal. And Sebastian goes along accordingly and willingly. And that takes us to the end of Act 4. We know just a couple things that don't completely get resolved by the end, but when you watch films or different stagings of it, we're going to find out that Sir Toby has gone off and married Maria in the next act, but we sometimes see that earlier on. We sometimes see them leaving and going away. Sometimes we see Fest, the knave or the fool, sort of departing from the scenes, although the end of the actual text of the play here doesn't necessarily come down one way or the other about what happens to everybody. And we do end with Fest, of course, which is very common for Shakespeare. If we think about like a Midsummer Night's Dream and figures like Peter Quince, and so that is definitely the fool here is someone who can break the fourth wall and talk to the audience as well at the very end of the play. But we'll get there in a few minutes. As we open with Act 5, Scene 1, we have Fest, who's got a letter. Now, remember, he's gone to get paper and ink and a candle for Malvolio, so presumably this is the letter that Malvolio wrote. So we've kind of just skipped some action in the play at this point. And we also need to think this, we've seen letters before in this play. So what is the work? Is it like worth writing a paper or doing a small study on, or just a meditation? What is the work that letters do in this play? In my last contextualized reading lecture, I mentioned this as well, with reference to Plato's Phaedrus and Socrates in that particular dialogue, saying, don't trust writing. There's something that displaces us. I can't speak for myself. I'm going to be taken out of context if I write things down. And so, of course, Shakespeare's audience is full of lawyers. There's a new legal system arising, not in the least because there's been a break with the Catholic Church, and there's all sorts of laws about, not being able to be a Catholic in England. Who one can trust, whether people are lying, they're saying that they're not a Catholic on the outside, but they're maintaining faith on the inside. Lots of work going on here as we think about what, authenticity do letters have. Fabian says, now as thou lovest me, let me see his letter. And Fest says, good Master Fabian, grant me another request. Anything, says Fabian. Do not desire to see this letter. Fabian says, this is to give a dog, and in recompense desire to have my dog again. And it's an interesting moment where Fest is willing to keep Malvolio's thoughts private, for at least for the time being. And then Orsino enters with Viola, who's dressed as Cesario, and then Curio, one of his lords, right? He sees Fest and he says, belong you to the Lady Olivia, friends? I, sir, says Fest, we are some of her trappings. We are basically her property. Orsino says, I know thee well. How dost thou, my good fellow? So like Orsino, as we've known that he enjoyed Fest's singing earlier on in the play. And Fest says, truly, sir, the better for my foes and the worse for my friends. Just to the contrary, the better for thy friends. And so Fest is already playing with Orsino, right? And Fest says, no, sir, the worse. How can that be? Fest then gives him this long sentence, just right in line with his character. Marry, sir, they praise me and make an ass of me. Now, my foes tell me plainly I am an ass, so that by my foes, sir, I profit in the knowledge of myself, and by my friends I'm abused, so that conclusions to be as kisses, if your 4 negatives make your 2 affirmatives, why then the worse for my friends and the better for my foes? Orsino loves this play on words and says, this is excellent, gives him a coin. Fest keeps on going, trying to get more money out of him. And then eventually Orsino says, you can fool no more money out of me. But please go and let your lady know that we are here. At this moment, Antonio enters with the officers. Remember, he was arrested earlier. And had mistook Cesario / Viola for Sebastian. Here Cesario says, here comes the man, sir, that did rescue me, which is interesting because we know that Antonio also rescued Sebastian for real, but Cesario thinks that Antonio rescued him by stepping into that false duel that Sir Toby had set up between Andrew and Cesario. So Orsino says, that face of his I do remember well, yet when I saw it last, it was besmeared as black as Vulcan in the smoke of war. A bobbling vessel was he captain of, for shallow draught and bulk unprizable, with which such scatheful grapple did he make with the most noble bottom of our fleet. That very envy and the tongue of loss cried fame and honor on him. What's the matter? And the officer says, we found Antonio. He's the person who took the Phoenix, who stole a ship, apparently. And so this goes back. Now we find a little bit more about what Antonio's crimes have been. He's being accused of being a pirate, of taking a ship and taking goods. And that also led to other kinds of violence against Antonio's nephew here. Um, then Cesario jumps in on his behalf, on Antonio's behalf, and said, "He did me kindness, sir, drew on my side, but in conclusion put strange speech upon me. I know not what was but a distraction." Orsino talks to Antonio. He says, "Notable pirate, thou saltwater thief, what foolish boldness brought thee to their mercies, whom thou in terms so bloody and so dear hast made thine enemies." And Antonio says, note that he keeps in the register of nobility here for Antonio. "Orsino, noble sir, be pleased that I shake off these names you give me. Antonio never yet was thief or pirate, though I confess on base and ground enough Orsino's enemy. I reject these things. There's maybe more to the matter." But he says, "A witchcraft drew me hither, that most ingrateful boy there by your side, from the rude seas enraged and foamy mouth did I redeem. A wreck past hope he was, his life I gave him, and did thereto add my love, without retention or restraint, all his in dedication. For his sake did I expose myself, pure for his love, into the danger of this adverse town, drew to defend him when he was beset, where being apprehended, his false cunning, not meaning to partake with me in danger, taught him to face me out of his acquaintance. So I brought this guy here who he thinks is Sebastian. I rescued him. I did this all for love." And you can clearly see that the language is not it's not just friendship, right? It is going much, much beyond that. And he feels betrayed by Cesario, who he thinks is Sebastian, because at the moment where he could have stood up for him and been his friend, he denied knowing him. Almost a sort of reference to Christ and Judas, right? Like the denial of knowing there. And that might be something to kind of chase down a little bit in the play, because we are thinking about these other kinds of biblical resonances, like the three wise men who are not wise in this play. And I do think that it's worth thinking about that, as absurd as it might sound to you, right? At the beginning, if you like the idea that I'm maybe reading too much into the play, that's not generally something that we as literary scholars are worried about. Now, it could be that I'm wrong. It could be I'm chasing down a loose end, or like that doesn't work. That's okay. But the layers of meaning and context is just something that we, as literary readers, literary scholars, do on a regular basis. And then we're just making arguments, and we're looking back to the text, and we're looking to context and history to make our arguments sound for our interpretations of text. Cesario doesn't understand what's going on. How can this be? Orsino says, "When came he to this town?" Antonio says, "Today, my lord, and for 3 months before, no interim, not a minute's vacancy, both day and night did we keep company." Then Olivia and her attendants come in. Orsino says, "Here comes the countess. Now heaven walks on earth." And remember, Orsino is still in love with her at this point. "But for thee, fellow, thy words are madness. 3 months this youth hath tended upon me. But more of that anon. Take him aside." And then he greets Olivia. Olivia says, "What would my lord but that he may not have?" I mean, she's been married in her mind, right? "Wherein Olivia may seem serviceable." Again, that shift to service language. "Cesario, you do not keep promise with me. You've gone back to this other lord." Cesario says, "Madame." Orsino says, "Gracious Olivia." The dashes here, as the editors tell us, they say this at the same time. "What do you say, Cesario, good my lord?" Cesario says, "My lord would speak. My duty hushes me." Don't tell me that I get to speak first, because she is deferring to who she thinks is her husband, right? So she says, you speak first. And Cesario is in service to Orsino and says, I can't speak before my boss speaks. Uh, so Olivia says, if it ought to the old tune, my lord, it is a fat and fulsome to my ear, as fat and fulsome to my ear as howling after music. Like, don't try and like give your love language to me. Like, I've already had a beautiful concert where I was married, right? Still so cruel, says Orsino. Still so constant, Lord, says Olivia. Orsino says, what to perverseness, you uncivil lady, to whose ingrate and inauspicious altars my friend the faithfulest offerings hath breathed out that e'er devotion tendered, what shall I do? And Olivia says, even what it please my lord, that shall become him. Again, what you will, do whatever you want, I don't care. Orsino says, why should I not? Had I the heart to do it, then, like to the Egyptian thief at point of death, kill what I love, a savage jealousy that sometimes savors nobly. But hear me this, since you to non-regardance cast my faith, and that I partly know the instrument that screws me from the true place in your favor, live you the marble-breasted tyrant still. Like, what if I wanted to kill you? But I'm not going to kill you, basically. But this your minion, whom I know you love, and whom by heaven I swear I tendered to dearly, him I will tear out of your cruel eye. So if you can't love me, fine, but I'm going to take Cesario away because I know that you have feelings for Cesario, and Cesario is going to come with me. And this the exchange happens here that gets really kind of loud or bold. So I'm going to read it out here. I'm going to tear him out of that cruel eye where he sits crowned in his master's spite. And then turns to Cesario, says, come, boy, with me. My thoughts are ripe in mischief. I'll sacrifice the lamb that I do love to spite a raven's heart within a dove. He almost says, he's like, I'm going to go murder my servant Cesario because you love him, just to spite you. And then, if that's not shocking enough, Cesario turns and says, and I most jocund, apt, and willingly to do you rest 1,000 deaths would die. You can kill me. You can sacrifice. Like, you can do anything to me. This is like really like, hitting at the borders of bondage and discipline or sadomasochism. All of that stuff, I think, is definitely right there for us to think about in interpretations. We've had bondage and servant language throughout the play itself. So is this a moment of sadomasochism? I know that that's like not really historically accurate, because the word sadistic comes from the Marquis de Sade, who's a later historical figure in France. But when we're putting this into to the language of today, I think it's definitely something that's being signaled here. And that kind of spanking and pleasure for pain and sexuality stuff is something that's it's throughout various Shakespeare plays as well. So it's just something that's going on, and just to let you know that it's in the culture then, and it's in the culture now. For those of you interested in maybe diving more into human sexuality. Olivia says, where goes Cesario? And Cesario says, after him I love more than I love these eyes, more than my life, more by all mores than e'er I shall love wife. If I do feign, you witnesses above, looks up to the skies, punish my life for tainting my love. And Olivia is just I'm detested. How am I beguiled? And Cesario's like, how did I beguile you? Like, who is wronging you here? And eventually, in the exchange here, Olivia calls Cesario husband, and that puts a pause to Orsino taking him away. And now Orsino is about to take his wrath out on Cesario. He thinks he's the one who's been betrayed. Olivia says, no, we just got married. right? And I will bring in the priest to tell it. And so brings in the priest, says, I know we charged you to secrecy, but now will you tell us, everybody, what happened? The priest says, a contract for eternal bond of love, confirmed by mutual joinder of your hands, attested by the holy close of lips, strengthened by interchangement of your rings, and all the ceremony of this compact sealed in my function by my testimony, since when my watch hath told me, toward my grave I have traveled but 2 hours. So, or then Orsino turns, of course, to Cesario. Now, what's interesting there, and I think maybe it's just something to mention, is that you would think that maybe sometime in the marriage ceremony they might have stated their names, you know, like I'm Sebastian and not Cesario. Um, uh, uh, the editors note that Olivia continues to call Cesario by the name Cesario throughout the play, throughout Act 5 here. And so apparently still thinks that she's married Cesario. And it's just something to think about. Puzzle, maybe Shakespeare just left it out for the story or the plot. You know, maybe there's something more to think about there as well. Maybe you do a historical search of what exactly the Anglican wedding ceremony would have been. Maybe they wouldn't have exchanged names. Maybe they just would have signed them on the book or something. Lots of things to think about there that just kind of exceed where I can go in this contextualized reading lecture today. Cesario protests. Olivia says, "Oh, do not swear. Hold little faith, though thou hast too much fear." She thinks that he's backing down because he's young, that he's frightened of Orsino, or that Cesario has not only broken the faith of their marriage, but now is creating oaths and swearing against their marriage, which goes beyond just denial, right? Or not saying anything. Then Sir Andrew enters in and calls for the love of God a surgeon, send a surgeon for Sir Toby, who's been hurt. Sir Andrew reports that they've had a fight with Cesario, and Cesario's right there. We know, we can sort of understand, but in the audience seat, that they've probably had an encounter. This is the encounter with Sebastian earlier, where it wasn't a game at all. And Sebastian, you know, Andrew hit Sebastian, and Sebastian hit back, and Sir Toby wasn't able to hold off. Fest had ran out earlier, remember? So Cesario says, "Why do you speak to me? I never hurt you. You drew your sword upon me without cause, but I bespake you for fair and hurt you not." And then here comes Sir Toby and Fest. And Sir Andrew says, "If a bloody coxcomb be hurt, you have hurt me. I think you set nothing by a bloody coxcomb." Here comes Sir Toby halting. "You shall hear more, but if he had not been in drink, he would have tickled you other gates than he did." So here Sir Toby got in a fight and he was drunk. He's still drunk as he says this, and also points the blame to Cesario. At this point, then, Olivia says, "Send him to bed." Again, so Olivia's just always taking care of, like, whether it's Malvolio, whether it's Sir Toby. This is the second time in the play, like send him off to bed. He's too trashed. Olivia says, get him to bed and let his hurt be looked to. And then Sebastian enters, and Sebastian runs to his wife and says, "I'm sorry, madam, I've hurt your kinsman, but had it been the brother of my blood, I must have done no less with wit and safety. You throw a strange regard upon me, and by that I do perceive that it hath offended you. Pardon me, sweet one, even for the vows we made each other but so late ago." And Orsino says, one face, one voice, one habit, and two persons, a natural perspective that is and is not. Then Sebastian recognizes Antonio. He's like, "Oh, Antonio, I've been looking all over for you, right?" And so there's an exchange between the two of them. Have you made a division of yourself? Says Antonio. Olivia says, "Most wonderful. This is like this is most amazing. Like I can't understand." That's what her sense of wonderment is here. And Stephen Greenblatt, the great Shakespeare scholar, has an early book of his. It's a really, it's just among some of my favorite academic books of all time, called Marvelous Possessions. And it's about the aesthetics of wonder during this time period, and especially as it relates to colonialism and the from the European perspective, the so-called finding or the discovery of a new world and all of the wonders of the new world. It's that kind of baffled amazement. Like we didn't even know that something like this could have existed. Definitely worth the read, that Greenblatt book. Sebastian sees Viola, and we get this kind of long exchange in the context of this play. I feel like it's a sustained dialogue between Sebastian and Viola. Do I stand here? I never had a brother, nor can there be that deity in my nature of here and everywhere. I had a sister whom the blind waves and surges have devoured. And then says to Cesario, or to Viola, of charity, what kin are you to me? What countrymen, what name, what parentage? So even Sebastian doesn't recognize Viola at this point. And there's an exchange by which they figure out through the fact that they know when their father died, when Viola was 13, that he had a mole, that they are indeed brother and sister. And Viola says, "I've left my maiden's weeds, my woman's clothing." I like that term for weeds. Maybe we should bring it back in the 21st century. Weeds for clothing. And so once they've kind of figured this out, Sebastian turns to Olivia. "So comes it, lady, you have been mistook, but nature to her bias drew in that. You would have been contracted to a maid, nor are you therein, by my life, deceived. You are betrothed both to a maid and man." Think about, what is that saying? What is that kind of saying about the gender fluidity here? Even the way that the play ends. Look at what Shakespeare's been able to put onto stage in front of us. And so when we bring that into current times where we have public discussions in a much broader sense about what gender fluidity might be, this play, I think, might have some stuff to say to us. Orsino then says, going on to Olivia, "Be not amazed, right noble is his blood." So this is Orsino to Olivia. "Be not amazed, right noble is his blood. If this be so, as yet the glass seems true, I shall have share in the most happy wreck." And then turns to Viola / Cesario and says, "Boy." Now, this is interesting because, Orsino should get it at this point, but still calls Viola boy. "Boy, thou hast said to me 1,000 times thou never shouldst love woman like to me." And Viola says, "And all those things will I overswear, and all those swearings keep as true in soul as doth that orbed continent the fire that severs day from night." Orsino says, "Give me thy hand, and let me see thee in thy woman's weeds." Viola says, "The captain that did bring me first on shore hath made my maid's garments. He upon some action is now in durance at Malvolio's suit." So Malvolio, for some reason, has had that captain arrested, and the editors make note of this, that this is maybe why the captain just hasn't appeared since Act 1 in the play, but we don't really know what's going on. And so they say we'll figure this out later. At this point, Fest enters with the letter from Malvolio and with Fabian, and gives the letter to Olivia. Olivia tells him to read it. Fest says, he has here writ a letter to you. I should have given it to you today morning, but as a madman's epistles are no gospels, so it skills not much when they are delivered. Olivia says, open it and read it. And Fest opens it, looks at it, and then he starts in this kind of crazy voice, by the Lord, madam. And Olivia stops him and says, how now, art thou mad? And Fest says, no, madam, but I do read madness. And your ladyship will have it as it ought to be. You must allow vox. So now he's doing this performance, this crazy performance of the letter. So instead, Olivia takes the letter, gives it to Fabian to read, who reads it out, saying that he can prove that he's not mad because he has Olivia's letter for him. And so Olivia says, did he write this? Aye, madam, says Fest. This savors not much of distraction. And so she says, go bring Malvolio in here so that we can straighten this thing out. Orsino, in the meantime, kind of makes amends with Olivia here. Says, madam, I'm most apt, or after Fabian exits, first Olivia makes this gesture. My lord, so please you, these things further thought on to think me as well as a sister, as a wife. One day shall crown the alliance on it. So please you, here at my house and at my proper cost. So we're going to have a party after all of this and settle everything. Everything's going to work out. Orsino basically accepts, says, madame, I'm the most apt to embrace your offer, and then turns to Cesario and says, your master quits you, and for your service done him so much against the metal of your sex, so far beneath your soft and tender breeding, and since you called me master for so long, here's my hand, you shall from this time be your master's mistress. And there's of course a play on mistress, sexual mistress, the one who now is the dominant one in the relationship because he's quit being the master. Olivia says, a sister you are she, to Viola now. So here comes Malvolio, the madman, and we get his perspective on the matter. Olivia says, this isn't my handwriting, it's Maria's handwriting. Now Maria's kind of like not to be found at this point. She says, Olivia says, but when we know the grounds and the authors of the letter, thou shalt be both the plaintiff and the judge. Like, you've been wronged, you're going to be in a situation to make a judgment about what happens. Fabian then just fesses up, admits that he was part of the plot, and says, Maria writ this letter at Sir Toby's great importance, and recompense whereof he hath married her. How with a sportful malice it was followed may rather pluck on laughter than revenge, if the injuries be justly weighed that have on both sides passed. Like, so as Fabian just jumps in, he says, yeah, it seems like something really bad has happened to Malvolio here. But when you hear that this is just payback for all Malvolio has been doing to various people, maybe it's going to seem funnier than it will seem awful. Olivia still turns to Malvolio and says, alas, poor fool. Now he's the fool, right? How have they baffled thee? Fest then jumps in, and he quotes some earlier speech from Malvolio and says, why, some are born great, some achieve greatness, and some have greatness thrown upon them. I was one, sir, in this interlude, but Sir Topus, sir, but that's all one. By the Lord, fool, I am not mad. So he's reenacting his ability to personify other people's voices. He says, "But do you remember, madam, why laugh at you at such a barren rascal, and you smile not? He's gagged. And thus the whirligig of time brings in his revenges." So Fest fesses up as well, and has that great line with the great word whirligig in it. And thus the whirligig of time brings in his revenges. Malvolio says, "I'll be revenged on the whole pack of you," and exits. So he's really, really angry. Olivia says he's been most notoriously abused. The editors say that this notoriously here means disgracefully. And Olivia echoes exactly Malvolio's complaint at 4.2, lines 87 and 88. Orsino then turns to Fabian and says, "Pursue him and entreat him to peace. He hath not told us of the captain yet." So we've got to figure out what this is going on with this captain who has the woman's weeds that belong to Viola. And then, makes another loving gesture. "But when in other habits you are seen, Orsino's mistress and his fancy's queen." They all leave then, except for Fest, and then we get the last lines, which I alluded to earlier here. "When that I was a little tiny boy, with hey-ho, the wind and the rain, oh, foolish thing was but a toy, for the rain it raineth every day. But when I came to the man's estate, with hey-ho, the wind and the rain, 'gainst knaves and thieves men shut their gate, for the rain it raineth every day. But when I came alas to wife, with hey-ho, the wind and the rain, by swaggering could I never thrive, for the rain it raineth every day. But when I came unto my beds, when I grew old, with hey-ho, the wind and the rain, with toss-pots still had drunken heads, for the rain it raineth every day. And great while ago the world began, with hey-ho, the wind and the rain. But that's all one, our play is done, and we'll strive to please you every day." And thus ends Shakespeare's Twelfth Night. Definitely, the theme of did the play go too far is kind of left up in question, right? Especially with respect to Malvolio. And you're going to read it, various people are going to read it differently. Maybe it did go too far. Maybe it became vicious at some point. I think that when we push the play's edges of propriety, I think that that's what the play has been doing throughout in various contexts, not just with Malvolio, but with representations of gender and sexuality on stage, definitely with walking the line with what can be said religiously, with allusions to pagan, not necessarily ceremonies, but pagan festivities as well. And then we're left with, again, Shakespeare leaves us with the last words of the play are coming from the fool himself, who clearly is one of the wittiest members in the play, and does seem to escape with his life, although sometimes when we see film versions, he's walking off and leaving, so kind of walking off into the sunset. Do with that what you will, as the play says. That ends our contextualized reading. There's a lot more to be said, a lot more to be thought about for sure, but at least this hopefully helps you get through the play if you've had trouble understanding what's the basics of what's going on. Have a great afternoon, evening, morning, wherever and whenever you are. Thanks for watching. Feel free to support us on Patreon if you can. Do not feel like if you're already paying for a class from me, you need to support me on Patreon. But that's just sort of for the general world. All right. Take care.